Hello, Gamecock fans. I'm Spencer Ball.
And I'm JP Barry. Welcome back to Ball Don't Lie, SGTV's premier live sports show.
JP and I will be giving you our weekly insight every Friday.
This week on the show, we're continuing our coverage of NCAA Football and the MLB Playoffs.
And we'll be giving you guys the scoop on Gamecock Volleyball so far.
Also, be sure to stick around for Week 3 of head-to-head college football pick'ems.
And without further ado, welcome to Ball Don't Lie.
Welcome to the Kennedy Greenhouse Studio.
I'm Spencer Ball.
And I'm JP Barry. When you get it all right, you can hear that, and it just flies out of Founders.
An 18-year-old phenom, Gigi Jackson, has really turned his play up a notch. I'm almost 2 years older than Gigi Jackson. He's doing things I couldn't even dream of doing.
They're the Golden Gamecocks. They're just so much fun to watch. What a historic year for them.
This is Ball Don't Lie.
This Saturday, the Gamecocks return from their bye week to face the Florida Gators in a homecoming SEC East showdown.
Yeah, JP, this one is going to be a good one. It's been a good one the last couple years, for the home team at least, as last year we saw Florida take down the Gamecocks 38-6, and a couple years ago the Gamecocks, as you can see by that lovely picture, took the win over the Gators 40-17 as one of the signature wins for Beamer in his first year.
Absolutely. You know, this is a rivalry that really got its wings when South Carolina joined the SEC back in the early 90s, and ever since there's been some certified bad blood, and that was only intensified by Steve Spurrier coming to the Gamecocks, as we have dubbed this the Spurrier Bowl. But these are two teams that are kind of in different places. However, I almost feel like they're really kind of similar quality-wise as opposed to what their record shows.
Yeah, and talking about Florida, they're 4-2 on the year, did suffer a really bad loss at Kentucky. Pretty embarrassing, I would say, as they just let Ray Davis just run all over them. But Graham Mertz has not looked too bad this year, as he has almost 1,500 yards, and he's second in the nation in completion percentage. But I think where this offense really starts to thrive is behind its two-back system, with both Johnson and Etienne in the backfield that have a combined about 750 yards and 6 scores, and they just get active back there.
Yeah, Gamecock fans, I'm afraid that if you thought we were over being terrorized by an Etienne, our days are not yet done on that front. But yeah, you know, Graham Mertz, Florida's going to run a lot of intermediate stuff, and give him easy looks, easy completions, and it's really going to be up to South Carolina's defense to try and take that away. As you can see, the Gamecocks rank 128th in the country in pass defense. So it's really going to be whether or not South Carolina's secondary can stand up to it. And I feel like the linebackers are going to be tested a lot as well. Florida likes to get their tight end involved. So we're going to see a lot of throws, I guess, to the boundary, maybe some underneath stuff. They're not going to let Mertz air it out and make them lose games, because as we saw against Kentucky, when they had to lean on their passing game to get back into it, Kentucky's defense was really able to get after it and force some turnovers.
Definitely, it's going to be Florida, I think, having to slow the game down. A lot of rushes to set up those kind of short passes, easy completions for Mertz. But on the defensive side, the Gators are really, really stout outside of that one good game, or bad game, against Kentucky. They're led by linebacker Shamar James. He leads the team in tackles with 42. And the Prince of Pass Rush, Prince Umanmielen, leads the team with 2 sacks at the defensive end. But it's kind of a joint effort on that defensive side.
Absolutely. You know, I feel like Florida has had a good defense in football since black and white television was in effect. And it's really no different. The Kentucky game was a lot of Ray Davis just being like superhuman. And the Gamecocks do not have a superhuman tailback. Although Mario Anderson has looked better over the last couple weeks, it's going to be a tall task, I think, for South Carolina's offense to sustain a lot of efficiency against the Florida defense. They might be able to get some busted plays out there in the secondary just because of the skill of South Carolina's wideouts, although it's looking like South Carolina will be without Juice Wells yet again.
Yeah, and if we can see that graphic again, we'll break down some of the Gamecock stats for you. But Rattler on the year, of course, we've talked about him week in and week out, over 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns. He's been a real bright spot for this team. But if you can see that 22 sacks allowed, Florida is looking at that number and just foaming at the mouth. I mean, they are going to take advantage of this offensive line. If they can, they're going to try their best to, and it's proven not too difficult so far.
Yeah, they're going to be like the alligator in Peter Pan, just kind of circling around and going nuts up there, because South Carolina's offensive line, although the run blocking did look a little bit better against Tennessee, I don't know. It's going to be tough, man. South Carolina's going to really have to try and drag this one, I think, into a not very fun game to watch, which I think would benefit lead to the home team having a better chance to win. But Florida, as we've seen, against Vanderbilt, that game was really boring. Against Tennessee, they turned that game into a slugfest. I don't know if we're going to get an incredibly watchable football game on Saturday in Columbia, but I feel like that this game is a very big linchpin for this season for South Carolina.
Absolutely. This is kind of the beginning of that final stretch, but the final stretch is tough for the Gamecocks. A lot of ranked opponents ahead of them. And the thing about this one is I think Beamer's going to hold nothing back in this game. You feel like this is one of those games, as you mentioned, it's so important. So they're going to throw everything in the kitchen sink at the Gators this weekend. I expect a fake punt. I mean, Kai Kroger.
He threw the only touchdown we scored against Florida last year.
Got a great arm, that kid. But, no, it's going to be trick plays and fake punts and different looks.
Going for it on fourth down.
Absolutely. It's gonna take a lot to beat this Florida team, and I don't think the Gamecocks are going to hold anything back because right now we don't have anything to lose.
Exactly, and I don't think the crowd is going to hold back much at all either.
Absolutely. It's fair week. Everyone I know is going to the game. It's going to be an awesome experience in Columbia, and the home crowd it's going to get fired up. I'm sure. They hate Florida. Florida hates us. I mean, it's going to be great. There's nothing more than a good old-fashioned hate fest.
Exactly. You know, this is what college football is all about. You know, college football, more than any other sport in America, is where the journey outweighs the actual destination by just so much. And it's because of stuff like this, games against your rival, games against, in-conference opponents, in-division opponents. You know, you lost to Tennessee, but you have a great opportunity to bounce back and really kind of put a downer on Florida season, because if they can get to 5-2, they could be looking at a pretty decent bowl destination, but South Carolina's right in the middle of that. So I don't know. This is that part of the year where college football really becomes special. We've had a great start to the year just across the country, but this is really it.
Oh, absolutely. I can't wait for this one. I can't wait for the rest of the SEC season. But we're not going to just talk about the SEC only today, are we, JP?
No, we are not. In the college football world, the ACC reigns supreme with 3 teams in the conference hoping to remain undefeated after this weekend.
And the ACC, it's one of those conferences that a couple months ago, didn't know how much longer we'd see the ACC stick around. But after these 3 teams putting up the start to the season so far, I mean, who knows what's the limit for this conference?
Absolutely, and it's really not the teams you'd expect. Miami was undefeated before last week's debacle where they refused to kneel the ball out against Georgia Tech. There's no Clemson. There's really no Virginia Tech, who was a staple of the ACC for so long. 3 undefeated teams tied for the Pac-12 for the most in college football. But the big caveat is none of them play each other in 2023. We could have 3 teams finish undefeated in the ACC this season, and absolutely none of them would play each other. We could have 3 teams vying for 1 spot or 2 spots in the ACC title game, and that really kind of begs the question, well, would a 12-0 team that didn't, like say North Carolina FSU make it, FSU wins, Louisville sitting there 12-0, does Louisville make the college football playoff? Like, the argument's there. But for some of these teams, this is the first time in a very long time they've seen success like this.
Absolutely, especially UNC starting 5-0 for the first time since 1997. We've seen Louisville and Florida State have some more recent success, starting 5-0 and 6-0 respectively within the past decade. But, I mean, these teams not playing each other is absolutely insane. If they all win out, I don't even know how they decide the conference championship. It's going to be a lot of fun, though. That's all I know. But there is stout competition the rest of the way for each of these teams.
Absolutely. It might end up being like the 1999 NFL wild card race where teams were like running up the score, trying to win the point differential criteria for that tiebreaker. But, this weekend you have Florida State taking on Syracuse, Louisville going on the road to Pitt, and UNC taking on Miami in a ranked versus ranked game. But it's not just this week, of course. You got Louisville. They still have to face Kentucky and Clemson after their big win against Notre Dame. And this is really in Jeff Brom's first year. North Carolina has to play number 17 Duke and end the season with Clemson and NC State both on the road. And Florida State, they've kind of played with fire a couple times. They might get burned by that. They might get burned by their arch rival Florida to end the year, but there's just plenty of opportunity, I think. And Miami coming to town. Miami, the game against Georgia Tech was so disappointing because it really looked like Mario Cristobal and the Hurricanes had really turned the page this year. They are still really good in all the advanced underlying stats and stuff like that, but they were doing great on the field too. Travis Van Dyke looked like the quarterback we kind of all expected him to be last season. And, they get a great opportunity with North Carolina coming to town with an ABC primetime kickoff in Chapel Hill. But it's going to be interesting to see how they bounce back from that.
And for the Hurricanes, they need that win. I mean, really bad. It was the way they lost that game.
That's a season
I pray
derailing.
for Miami
yeah.
fans. That was horrific. All they had to do was take a knee and they handed off. He fumbles. I'm sure you all saw it. The 50-yard pass from Haynes King to his jacket
rolling out
receiver.
of the pocket, on the run. That's what you love about college football. And there's something special about Miami always being on the losing end of Hail Mary plays, whether it's Doug Flutie or the current day Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. But
just
it's something. If we could get that back up real quick, these teams. They're getting these wins big. Like I said, Florida State's struggling a little bit, but they have the 3-touchdown win over LSU. North Carolina with the plus 88-point differential. Louisville had Notre Dame in their house last week and really dominated them the entire second half after being tied at halftime. So
made us look like fools in the pick'ems.
Yeah, well, they make me feel like a fool every week. But it's not just – all these teams have a great quarterback. You have Drake May for the Tar Heels, Jack Plummer for Louisville, and Florida State, of course, Jordan Travis. But all these teams built upon solid defenses, which I don't think is what we expected from UNC this year, is it, Spencer?
Absolutely not. I would say I've had the misfortune of watching UNC play defense the last couple of seasons, and they looked awful. Every game, it feels like it was a 47-40 shootout. And
really fun for a neutral fan.
Oh, man. I mean, if you love touchdowns, UNC is much-watched football. But this year, their defense is really paving the way for their success, as you see people like Cedric Gray leading the team in tackles. And their defensive backs performing a lot better than I think anyone thought, especially with the amount of transfers they had to go out and get.
Absolutely. They lost a lot of people to the portal, and they restocked it through the portal. 7 interceptions on the year for UNC. And their defense, 19 points per game, ranks 31st in the nation and 35th in terms of yards per game. But even with all the ACC hype this week, we'd be foolish not to mention the Oregon Ducks going on the road to Washington in our beloved Pac-12 with one of the biggest games in college football.
Boy, do we love the Pac-12. This is going to be just such a great game. It was amazing last year, and it's the two of the best quarterbacks in the nation, and they're back at it again, JP.
Absolutely. One of the best rivalries in all of football. 7 lead changes last year in that game in Eugene. It's the 115th all-time meeting between these two. However, it's the first time with both of them ranked in the top 10. I'm super excited. College game day going to Washington. The Huskies just 1-6 all-time on game day, just the 3rd time they've ever hosted it. Meanwhile, Oregon, one of the mainstays of college football's kind of flagship pregame thing, 17-11 all-time. So history in terms of that favors the Ducks. But man, this game is going to be special. As you can see, both players top 3 in terms of Heisman odds on the year, and their stats speak for themselves.
Absolutely, with Michael Penix almost at 2,000 yards already in 5 games is so ridiculous. And it feels
barely
like
played, and so yeah, exactly.
It feels like they take him out after, halftime or the 3rd quarter. But this receiving core is special, especially with Rome Odunze, 608 yards, 4 touchdowns. But I think the thing that is going to be so surprising is not only does this team have weapons, but they have the ability to protect their quarterback. Their offensive line only allowing 3 sacks is just ridiculous. It's one thing to have weapons. South Carolina has weapons, but you know what they don't have?
An offensive line.
An offensive line, and the Huskies have both, and that is special.
Yeah, being able to control the front, whether you want to run the ball, even though Washington doesn't run the ball as much as other teams, they're one of the lowest teams in the country in terms of run play percentage. But they're still getting it done. They're scoring in the red zone at an over 90% clip, and it's just one of the more electric things to watch in college football. Washington has a great home environment, and I can't wait to see how their fans come out. But Oregon, man, they've been here in the Pac-12. It feels like they've been in these kinds of games for the last 2 decades at least.
Absolutely, and they're off to a fantastic start so far. Again, Bo Nix leading the way. He leads the nation in completion percentage with 80.7. Just the development we've seen from him is really, really impressive because we saw him kind of struggle at Auburn. He transfers out, and the last couple years with Oregon, he's been unstoppable.
Absolutely. And, Oregon, it's kind of, Bo Nix has been awesome. And he's obviously, like I said, top 3 in Heisman odds. You can see his stats. He is outstanding. But Oregon, what they have that Washington doesn't offensively is just the unbelievable threat of the run game. Bucky Irving, 50 carries, 399 yards, 4 touchdowns on the season. And his backup, Jordan James, with 302 yards and 7 touchdowns on just 34 carries. You know, we saw it against Colorado. We saw it against Stanford. You know, maybe where the passing game can get a little stagnated, Oregon can just hand the ball off to one of their speedy running backs. Those big hog mollies up front going to open up some holes. They're going to run about 40 yards for a touchdown. I mean, it's soul-breaking. It's not what Oregon used to be like, what Washington is now, just throwing the ball over the field, having a fun old time. Oregon has kind of morphed into like a West Coast, more fun version of Georgia and Alabama, where they're going to wear you down, they're going to be physical, they're going to come up on you, they're going to bust you in the mouth, but they're also going to have these fun concepts and, you know, throw the ball all over the place. We could get that up again. You can see what Oregon's defense has been able to do this season. They've been one of the best defenses in all of college football, top 5 in terms of points per game, 6th in the nation in yards per game, but man, they force havoc, don't they?
They absolutely do. Kyrie Jackson leads the team in interceptions with 2 interceptions, but also the team in general, 18 sacks, 33 tackles for loss, and we definitely saw it in that Colorado game. Boy, they were getting after Shedeur Sanders. They just take apart weak offensive lines, but this Huskies offensive line does look to be fit for the test so far. I think that's going to be a great battle at the line of scrimmage. But another thing about those running backs, they're not just running backs. They can come out of the backfield and catch passes too. This offense is super dynamic, super high-paced, and this, I can't wait.
This very well could be the best game of the entire college football season. I'm just so unbelievably excited. Like, Oregon's going to come out there playing like some crazy animals. Washington's going to come out here trying to make the statement to the rest of the college football world that this is the year for the Huskies, for this big, you know, kind of a program revival. They lost Chris Peterson, he retired, and they were kind of going through a little bit of a wasteland. But man, you know,
and all in the Emerald City, man. What a nickname.
Exactly. You know, that stadium's gorgeous. You can see in that picture, the waterfront property
Waves,
that Washington
man.
has.
That's
I mean,
nice.
it is so special. I love it so much. But you know, like I said, college football, it's the journey, not the destination. Like, who cares about, you know, who's going to match up in what playoff game, or who's going to make it to the BCS Alt Division, like all these different sponsors, championship game presented by Geico. Oregon, Washington, an October afternoon in Seattle, this 3:30 ABC kickoff. I'm juiced, man. I'm amped. I can't wait. This is going to be one of the
Your
best.
Your speech has me fired up.
You
I
know,
can't wait
it's all about
Saturday.
college football, man.
But after the break, we're going to be done with football until Pick'ems, but we're going to catch you up with the MLB Divisional Series standings so far.
The MLB Divisional Series wrapped up last night as we now look ahead to the championship series in both leagues after what's been a tumultuous start to the postseason, huh, Spencer?
Oh, it sure has, and a lot of surprises, I would say, is, you know, perfectly named upsets galore as the number 1 seed is out in both conferences.
Absolutely. You know, the Baltimore Orioles, winners of 101 games in the regular season, swept by Texas. I think the biggest thing in this series was Texas's bullpen being able to stand up to the Orioles' potent lineup, but also they got good innings out of their starters and were able to just totally pounce on Baltimore's questionable starting pitching.
There he goes.
It was, you know, high scoring in both games, 21 runs across the 3 games of the ALDS for the Rangers. And it's a disappointing end to what was a very promising, great season for the young O's, but I think they'll be back here, huh, Spencer?
Absolutely. You could kind of tell the experience just wasn't there. So this is definitely going to be beneficial for the team coming back next year. But boy, the Rangers really surprised me. I thought this series would be close, but I did not expect the Rangers to just come out and mollywop the Orioles like they did. They were just pounding the ball in Baltimore and back there in Texas too.
Well, you know, the Texas faithful is going to welcome them with arms wide open, and the Rangers are going to be looking to go higher on in the postseason. But as we move on, you speak of experience. The team that's always here, the Houston Astros, they improved to 56-34 in the postseason since 2017.
The team no one wants here. Let's go ahead and
putting away the Minnesota Twins in 4 games. It was a pretty fun series. You know, Houston lost game 2 at home. It was 1-1. It felt like the Twins had kind of gained momentum in the series. And then the Astros showed why they've been to 7 straight American League Championship Series with how they responded and were able to take both games in Minnesota.
And Yordan Alvarez, statistically, He might be one of the best postseason hitters of all time so far.
I think he's one of the best hitters ever. It's absurd.
It is ridiculous.
It's very rare in sports that there's a player so good and so talented and so special that no matter what kind of things you can say about him, you can't do it justice. You have to go out there and watch. I mean, the Twins were out here. They weren't throwing him competitive pitches. They were throwing balls above the zone, balls below it. He was going under. He was going over. He was reaching out of the zone. He was doing what they wanted him to do. He was still clobbering it like 450 feet. He's not human.
He's not.
He's not cheating either. He's the one Astro that I like because he's just so good. He's just so good, and he's going to let you know about it. But
for the first time ever, a championship series with two teams in the same state, and it's going to the Lone Star State. Texas Rangers versus the Houston Astros. I can't wait for this one, JP.
Absolutely. You know, I think the big kind of question mark here is, how is Texas's bullpen going to be able to hold up against the Astros lineup? Because Baltimore's lineup was very good, but like you said, lacked the experience. This is a postseason performing lineup. The Rangers bullpen looked good against Baltimore. They had some shaky moments, but it's a whole nother beast here against Houston. They're going to need to shut down those final innings. I mean, we've seen Aroldis Chapman late against the Astros fall apart, and I don't know, but I think this is going to be a slugging a slugging ALCS. Not getting ahead to the World Series just yet, but
we'll preview the other side too.
I'm so excited. Yeah, in the National League, you know, starting out with the LA Dodgers, the team with the third most wins in baseball, swept by the Arizona Diamondbacks, the Snakes, in the postseason for the first time since 2017.
Dodgers are horrible.
Oh, they were terrible. You know,
abysmal.
Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman combined 1 for 21. Dodgers starting pitching in 3 games combined. 4 2/3 innings pitched, 13 earned runs allowed, 16 hits given up, 5 home runs in 3 games. 4 of those home runs came in Game 3, where in the bottom of the first, Arizona came up there and slugged 4 home runs against Lance Lynn and the Dodgers. Man, the Diamondbacks, they've been insane this whole postseason. They out-homered the Dodgers 19-1 in the NLDS, and in the wild card series against the Brewers, they hit 4 more home runs too. 13 home runs in just 5 games for the for the Diamondbacks. 2 sweeps.
They are finding their stride. They're hot right now, but the Dodgers, that's got to be the most embarrassing thing ever. How do you have such a big payroll, come out in the postseason and just
Well, you know, maybe
flat,
having such
time
a high
and time again.
The only way it could be more embarrassing is if you had such a high payroll and you didn't even make it, like the Mets or the Yankees or the Padres or the Cardinals or.
He makes a good point. Don't say the Cubs. I might start crying on TV.
The 5th NLDS exit in the last 10 years for the Dodgers. You know, it feels like they do this all the time. They have a great regular season. They win the NL West. And then they just come out here and lay an egg. But this was the egg to defeat all eggs. The first time they've been swept since the 2006 NLDS, which I believe was against your Cubbies. But, you know, it's a tale as old as time for the Dodgers. And, you know, the other NL team that lost, it's another tale as old as time. You know, the Braves broke about 1 million records, and it seemed like all the records they were breaking were of teams from the late 90s and the early 2000s, and it's only right that they honor those teams by going out with a whimper in the NLDS. And it was kind of the inverse. You know, going into this, as a Braves fan, I thought, if we lose, it's going to be a bunch of high-scoring games because the Phillies mash, but we mash too. You know, the highest slugging percentage of a team in MLB history. It wasn't.
There was no mash to be found.
There was no mash. It was what, like 4 or 5 extra base hits the entire series across 4 games, and 3 of those came from Austin Riley. Austin Riley was the only one who really showed. You know, Ronald Acuna Jr. had a single and a double, and then 2 stolen bases. Matt Olson walked a couple times. You know, Orlando Arcia, God help his soul, what happened to him? But it was just. The funny thing was the whole year was like, well, the Braves, you know, so-and-so is going through a little bit of a slump, but the rest of the lineup's hitting like 1 million home runs. And it was such a great, I think, final nail in the coffin. This and the Dodgers series for the whole, you know, home runs don't win in the postseason. Like, you don't have to out-homer your opponent to win the postseason because the Phillies hit about 1 trillion home runs. I mean, even
especially in that 10-2 game, they
hit 6 home runs against Bryce Elder and the Braves bullpen. But Spencer Strider pitched well, and even then he gave up the solo home run to Bryce Harper in Game 2. He gave up 3 solo home runs last night. That's the thing. You know, your pitching goes so well. The bullpen was outstanding for Atlanta. I'll give them their props there. They showed up ready to play. They kept the offense in it and gave them opportunities. And that's the thing about how great this Braves team was. And it's why it feels so soul-rending to watch it happen. You know, this is up there with Super Bowl 50 and the last like 4 or 5 Carolina Hurricanes playoff exits. You know, it's because they were so good that they played so badly and still had so many chances to win. Either it's the multiple bases loaded squandered in Game 1. You know, it's taking the lead in Game 3 and squandering it like that, leaving Bryce Elder in too long. It's loading the bases last night, and then you have runners on the corners with no outs, down by 2, and you know, it's moments
You'd
like
almost
that.
wish they'd lose 50-0. And
You know, it's like
Yeah.
losing on a touchdown on the final play of the game with 10 men on the field. It's like giving up a last-second field goal. It's like so many other terrible things that happen to me. I just keep on trucking, though. But the NLCS, Phillies versus Diamondbacks, going to be some outstanding games there, I think.
Absolutely, and of course we'll be bringing you the coverage right here on Ball Don't Lie, but now we're going to talk about a sport we haven't covered this semester. The Gamecock Volleyball team looks to bounce back after a bit of a disappointing stretch in the second half of their season.
Yeah. You know, a 7-8 overall record, 1-5 in conference, last in the SEC. They have protected their home well, and recently they've picked up a little bit of steam.
They sure have, as they did win on Wednesday night, defeating Georgia 3-1, winning their first conference game. And it's just kind of a tale of two halves so far. They're 6-2 through their first 8 games, but only 1-6 through their last 7, and that one win came on Wednesday. They were 0-6 in their last 6 games before this previous match, but a lot of them have been close, and we just talked about it. Those are the losses that hurt the most because they're right there in it the whole time.
Absolutely, and they're led by number 20, Riley Whitesides, team leader in just about every stat imaginable. And so, like you said, there's so much of just like the juxtaposition. Like, it's an mediocre overall record, but you're bad in conference play. You're good at home, you're bad on the road. You know, you play close against top 25 teams, you lose to unranked teams. You finally get a home win, and now you're going on the road all the way to College Station to take on Texas A&M. You're 6-2 through your first 8, 1-6 in your last 7. So it's the consistency that I think really plagues a lot of South Carolina sports.
And if you look at all the statistics as well, they're neck and neck in total stats with their opponents, and yet they still have a 7-8 record and not performing well in the SEC, which is tough. The SEC is a great conference for about every sport, but you want to compete at the highest level, and they've kind of faltered so far in conference play.
Absolutely, and that's all we've got for you today. We'll be right back after the break with this week's Pick'ems to wrap up another episode of Ball Don't Lie. Welcome back to Week 3 of BDL Pick'ems. After last week, I'm currently 8-3 on the season, while Spencer sits at 4-7.
I don't want to talk about it.
You know, it's been a little bit of an interesting start. I wanted to flip my pick to Oklahoma, but it was a little too late. Our glorious producer let me know that. I did pick Oklahoma in my personal pick-em with my best friends.
Allegedly.
I got the points for that one. That's all that matters, really. But starting out with Florida and South Carolina this weekend in Columbia. Who do you got, Spencer?
I've got South Carolina, and I think it's going to be the home crowd that really, pushes them to that next level. And Florida also doesn't move. I'm not saying either team necessarily moves me. So they haven't looked great, to be honest, either one. But I think this is a must-win game for South Carolina. They need this win for the rest of the season, just for momentum's sake, for success going forward. They need to get the win against Florida, and I think they will because I think Beamer's not going to hold anything back.
You know, I agree with you wholeheartedly in everything you just said. I just can't in good faith bet against a team with a good defense going up against a team with a just dysfunctional offense in so many different ways. You know, it's the offensive line, it's the run game, it's being able to keep Spencer Rattler upright, it's not turning the ball over, it's
Injuries
finishing
too,
drives,
yeah.
It's injuries, it's why I'm picking Florida. It's why I think that the Gators, as unimpressed with them as I am, I think Florida wins, and I think it's just a really terrible game.
Yeah.
But staying in the SEC East, we have Mizzou trying to bounce back from that tough loss to LSU at home, going on the road to Kentucky, who you picked last week to beat Georgia.
It was a foolish mistake. we'll play it off as I just did it, to make the show a little more interesting.
Drama.
Because you said Devin Leary's not a big-time player, and boy, were you right, as he just looked god-awful against Georgia. Just the whole team fell apart. And then Mark Stoops was like, we need you to donate so we can pay our players more money than Georgia. And I was like, yes. Mizzou also bit me last week, falling to LSU, but that was a really, really close game.
That was a fun game.
And they could have won that game.
Very easily.
Very easily. Shot themselves in the foot a little.
That was a very silly football game. It was very fun, though, and Mizzou, you think they're going to bounce back?
Oh, give me the Tigers.
Give me the Tigers. Too. I think I'm taking the Tigers as well. I think it's all about the Mizzou as they bounce back, as they continue a pretty good season. I don't know why they dropped out of the top 25. I think they'll be right back in it.
That was a really good performance
after
against
their
LSU.
win against Kentucky. But now,
Daddy of them all.
The game of the week. Game of perhaps the entire season. We have Oregon on the road against Washington. Spencer?
Give me the lefty legend Michael Penix. 2 years in a row taking down the Ducks, this time at home in front of the sea of purple. This is going to be an awesome game. But I feel special about the Huskies team this year.
I really want to. I really love Washington. I really think that they bring a tremendous vibe to college football. I think they're just so much fun to watch. But Oregon's defense, every time I think something great about Washington, a little voice pops up in the back of my head telling me about how just...
Remember Jake Browning.
remember the violence of the Ducks. Remember how ferocious they are when they get after the quarterback. And I fear for Michael Penix Jr.'s health and wellness, because I think the Oregon Ducks are about to go into Seattle and pull out a big win against their hated rival. And a game I think is going to be great, but when the going gets tough, a defense is what's going to get on going, and I think Oregon's going to get a big win.
Now, JP, we move on to a rather heartbreaking subject, Notre Dame versus Southern Cal. And last week, Notre Dame disappointed the both of us. I'm sure you about 20 times as much as me, but we'll digress on that. Who you got this week in South Bend, JP?
I could stand up here and give some heartfelt Dan Devine or high school, clear eyes, full heart, can't lose type of speech, but this is a game that needs no introduction. It's Notre Dame Southern Cal. It's a night game, prime time in South Bend, under the lights with NBC there broadcasting it. You have your quarterback. You have your defense. It's a matter of whether or not the offensive line is going to stand up and dust themselves off after the last couple disappointing weeks, look themselves in the mirror and realize that you're the Notre Dame football offensive line. You go out there, you smash mouths. You steal candy from babies. You go out there, you put people's face in the dirt. And I think that this Saturday night, Notre Dame's offensive line is going to stand up. They're going to realize who they are, who they should be. They're going to take Southern Cal's defense and they're going to maul them in a torrential downpour in South Bend. And I think Notre Dame puts down an unholy beatdown upon Southern Cal. Audric Estime, 400 yards, 5 touchdowns. Notre Dame wins. Big.
He's got me about to just jump through the glass and run off. I'm fired up. Give me the Fighting Irish as well. I don't think Southern Cal has played that high of opposition so far. You can't struggle against Arizona State and then expect to just beat Notre Dame. Give me the Irish. But moving on to...
we have more games.
We're not done yet. That would have been a great outro, though. But moving on to even more football. Miami at UNC. My former love. JP, who you got?
I think the Hurricanes, they're going to try and reestablish themselves offensively, and I think this game's good. A lot of the UNC-Miami games the last couple of years have been a lot of fun, shootout-type performances. But give me the Tar Heels. I think UNC bounces back from a little bit of a disappointing performance their last time out, and they get a big statement win under the lights.
I completely agree. I'm going to also take the Tar Heels, but it's because of their defense. I just think they've really impressed me so far. And, I'm fully ready to be let down by that. But Tez Walker's coming back. They have a really good receiving core. Amarian Hampton has been proven to be a great running back so far. And you got Drake May in the pocket. Give me the Tar Heels.
Absolutely. And finishing off BDL Pick'ems with some Pac-12 after dark action as number 18 UCLA goes on the road to number 15 Oregon State. Oregon State, they bounced back from that tough loss to Washington State with a solid win. UCLA coming off of a big win against Washington State, looking to really kind of reinvent their season, reinvent their program. Spencer, who you got?
I got the Bruins in this one. Funnily enough, I like the way this defense has been playing. They shut down Washington State, which I did not expect at all. And they got an offense led by Dante Moore. They just have a lot of talent. I think they go into Corvallis and get the dub.
This is gonna be. I think it's gonna be a fun game. It's two
really
very
fun.
Conflicting styles. UCLA is gonna air it out. Oregon State as we've gushed about on this show, loves to run the ball. But Dante Moore, when we saw him go on the road against Utah in that tough defense, threw a pick six on his first pass and was really just quite poor all day. I don't think it'll be quite as bad as 97 passing yards and 2 picks. But I think Oregon State's defense is going to be able to rattle him a little bit early, and the run game is just going to be able to kind of salt away and limit possessions for UCLA's offense. And I got the Beavers getting a big win.
Hey, I respect it. We love the Pac-12. We hope you love BDL, but that's going to do it for this episode of Ball Don't Lie. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and even Facebook if you're still using it at SGTV at USC.
To keep up with all of our content, be sure to also visit us online at SGTV at USC.com. For SGTV, I'm JP Barry.
And I'm Spencer Ball. From all of us here at SGTV, have a great weekend, Carolina.
Forever to thee.